we'll do the live thing first. Like, hey everybody, welcome back to the podcast. This is me, your host, Bigmark. If it's your first time here, or if you've been listening for a while, don't forget to smash that like button and subscribe to the podcast on YouTube or wherever you listen. And tell your friends about everything that goes on. We're back in the studio. We got Jack Williams. We got Christian behind the scenes here.
What's up?
Hey. Yo, what up, lads?
Hey,
Christian's deep in the sauce over here,
from the
rolling
distance,
out,
bro.
in the Bigmark Physio Corner. Bigmark Physio Corner available only on our Patreon, patreon.com/
top tier,
the Bigmark Podcast.
Top tiers only.
That's right, baby. Yeah,
Top
you only
content.
gotta pay the top money to see what it's like in the Physio Corner and what we got.
Get involved. Crack and pop, dude.
But hey, we're back again. Another week, just me and you and the boys sitting down. We're talking about something called simulation theory, and we're gonna be taking things a little bit off the rails and a little bit off the books today. Like I said, on this podcast, we talk anything from sports to psychedelics, and one of those things is like kind of that I'm interested in is like more kind of heavier science stuff, even science fiction-esque stuff that, you know, they kind of say truth is stranger than fiction sometimes. And, you know, this is one of those things that I think is really interesting. It's something that's becoming talked about a lot more nowadays. And yeah, if no one's ever heard of simulation theory, you can check it out. There's lots of cool resources online and check it out. But, you know, this has been my kind of cool experience. And actually me and both Jack, or all three of us, Jack, Christian, and myself, have seen this wicked documentary, which is a lot what we're going to be talking. We're going to be talking a lot about this documentary called A Glitch in the Matrix. Did it come out last year or this year even? I think it's
last year, 2020.
2020, really new, super cool. I can't even remember. I think I just came across it. It was one of those things that just like
so random,
right?
Yeah, you're just like, hey man, try this out.
Yeah, and I was like, boys, check it out. I don't even know how to find it, but try and find it. And anyway, super interested, right? And what? And anyway, so simulation theory is obviously not something that's brand new. It's been around for a long time. Actually, Philip K. Dick, who's a famous author. Have you ever read any Philip K. Dick books, boys? It's like The Android's Dream of Electric Sheep is one of his most famous ones, which like
No, I
they
haven't.
base they
I've heard of that one though.
that's basically what they based Blade Runner on.
Right. Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And then he did Man in the High Castle.
Blade Runner.
Did you guys? That was a cool. They did a show called about Man in the High Castle, which was basically a reality where Japan, Germany, and Russia won World War II.
Yeah.
But this guy wrote this book, or this woman wrote this book that about like our reality timeline, and it was like kind of like a mind twister. But it was basically like revealing that there could be like simultaneous realities. Also, again, slowly hinting at this simulation theory. We'll actually talk about Philip K. Dick in a little bit. But the first time I ever heard about simulation theory was actually in first year psychology at Western. It was just kind of one of the things we were talking about when we were learning about the brain and kind of how it works, and just kind of because the human body can't actually experience the true nature of reality because of our senses. We're limited by our senses. We don't actually experience the universe unfiltered. So basically our brain is only reacting to impulses that are created from that sense input. And essentially the idea that was brought up to me in that class was we could potentially just be a brain in like a vat that some scientist is just using electrical impulses to hit the right parts and project, making us think that we're actually feeling and sensing and touching and seeing a blue sky and doing all that stuff, which super interesting to think about. And I remember like, again, it wasn't particularly sciencey to, you know, and my experience, especially in those first few days of intro to psych, where like, you know, it was a lot about neurology and, you know, structures in the brain, basically how the nervous system works, right? So as much as psychology has that neuroscience part, it is also a social science, and it has all those other aspects too, the cognitive aspects, and really, really interesting. Anywho, and like basically, if you've never heard of simulation theory or never think you've experienced simulation theory, if you've seen The Matrix, you've experienced simulation theory. You've seen it. That's basically a shot for shot like reproduction of like what simulation theory could be. Again, The Matrix, if you haven't seen The Matrix, you know, is a movie about Neo, the protagonist, was inputted into the system that these machines were harvesting his energy. Again, this is extreme science fiction. Watch the movie, wicked movie, but and the machines were basically projecting this reality into Neo's brain so that he could just be docile and they could use him to harvest his energy. And there are these people that live outside this system and can actually remove you and unplug you from the Matrix. And that's basically most of the movie. And again, a commentary on simulation theory. Again, because a little bit more about the theory itself, our brain and senses can only process a fraction of the world, like I mentioned. So what we are using are concepts and tools to actually learn about the true nature of reality. Like I said, even using something like The Matrix is just an idea of what simulation theory, because it's hard to actually completely explain what it is. Basically, what humans have always done is we've used new technology. Like we've learned about simulated realities with like virtual reality, and you know, we understand that we can create these worlds, video game stuff, all that kind of thing. The question is, are we already inside a simulation? And it's hard to say, and a lot of people are again, they're like Elon Musk even. What's that? Touched on it for sure, but Neil deGrasse Tyson said basically like he's completely like open to the fact like there's less and less evidence against the fact that we aren't living in a simulation. There's more evidence the fact that we are than there isn't. So that's pretty interesting. Like top scientists are thinking about this, right? And it's interesting. I mean, you know, how much is it really going to affect our world, right? If this is true, you know, we live on a small planet, like in a solar system that's rotating on a spiral arm of a giant galaxy that's part of billions and trillions of other galaxies that are potentially part of all their like, how much does that actually really change the game, right? If you really think about it, right? Anyway, and it's like we said in this movie, you know, one of these characters was saying, you know, if everything's a simulation, what's preventing me from shooting everybody and going door to door and shooting? And it's like, that's all that's preventing you from shooting people is the fact that you think that this reality is what your five senses tell you it is. And, you know, again, I guess it speaks again to how much people root themselves in this reality and how important it is for them to have this base understanding of what reality is and never look down that hallway ever again. Just be like, all right, I know what the world is. I know when I wake up, it's going to be like this, and I'm never going to explore there, and I'm never going to go down any other pathway that might alter that. You know, whether it's psychedelics, whether it's meditation, whether it's just opening yourself to new experiences. People shut themselves off because, again, it would be hard to build society if we didn't like at least draw that line in the sand somewhere, right? So I get it, but interesting thought anyway. So there's a video I actually watched, really interesting. There's kind of a test to see if we are in a simulation. All right, so everyone listening in. So there's 5 assumptions. Okay, we're gonna go through 5 assumptions. meaning essentially everything we're going to be saying, let's assume it to be true. Number one, it is possible to simulate consciousness. So let's say even if this is in the future, however we do it, or now, present, whatever, let's imagine it's possible to simulate consciousness. The brain itself is making 10 to the whatever permutations a second. Imagine we can create a computer that can do that. Okay, number one. Number two, technological progress will not stop anytime soon. So even if you look around today, like from the 80s to the 90s to the aughts to today, right, to the 20s, right, how much technology is just going, like, I don't see any end to it. It's going to keep going. Like, why not, right? So why isn't it going to get to the point where we do make a simulation? Mm-hmm. Why wouldn't it, right? Mm-hmm. That was assumption 2. Assumption 3, advanced civilizations don't destroy themselves. So this is one of the biggies here, folks. This is a big problem with potentially interstellar civilizations as well, is that sometimes, unfortunately, advanced civilizations get to the point with that they either destroy themselves through war or whatever they're trying to do eventually destroys the planet, or they kill it slowly like we are, right? Like, there's a lot of reasons why advanced civilizations should fail. There's a lot more reasons why they should fail than they should succeed. So that's actually why, not only why there could be a simulation, but also the fact that we don't just look up in the skies and see all these different planets, right, or different civilizations out in the cosmos. Anyway, the Fermi paradox, I think that talks about. Anyway, assumption number 4, super advanced civilizations want to run simulations. So let's say we get to this point, we haven't destroyed ourselves. Okay, do we even want to do this? Now, this is a presupposition that we can never actually confirm. Who knows what, like, super advanced beings that are so knowledgeable, that have advanced technology that we can't even imagine, who knows what they're going to be thinking? So maybe they want to do this. Maybe they might look at this and think that it's a joke, right? And be like,
2200.
Why would we possibly create a simulation to just mess with these people? They would look at us like ants if they were this advanced, and like looking if they could, i.e. advanced civilization that could be creating the simulation, they would look at us like ants. So why would they even create this? Maybe to study us, potentially, but that's only us with our primitive brains, that we like to study things and smash things apart and what's this made of and how does this work, right? That's like a primitive mindset. Who knows what, like, these super advanced civilizations. Okay, so again, number 4, let's just say they want to. Okay, cool. Number 5, if there are a lot of simulations, you're probably inside one. If there's one, there's many. So chances are, if there even is a simulation, I wanted to say that so bad. Simulation. If there's a simulation, there's definitely like billions upon million, like so many, that the chances of us being one of the original copies potentially of the simulation, or an original person in the simulation, is very, 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 very little. And again, it's really interesting. A lot of the experts and stuff, when I was looking into all this stuff, a lot of the experts in simulation theory are really into video games. And like, I have nothing against video games. I've never been a big video game guy. Now, it's kind of interesting to think that some of these people, they played a lot of video games, which is like a simulation of a reality. Mm-hmm. And they're thinking, hey, this simulation theory is a thing, right? So, it's interesting. I think, again, our technology dictates our explanation of the world, right? Like, whatever technology you're exposed to, that's how you think about the world. I know I think about the world kind of musically a lot, rhythmically and stuff, and that's older technology, but that's kind of, if you want to talk about something, because I mean, a guitar is a tool, and drums and musical instruments are tools, and there is a mathematics to music, even though I don't necessarily see it that way. You know, if you know video games inside and out, you know coding, and you know how all that stuff works, like maybe you might look through the world in that kind of lens. But I just noticed that as something that was interesting, that most of the people talking about this also had, like, one dude in that documentary, I think, I don't know if you remember, one thing about this documentary we were watching, a lot of it was done, like, I guess it was recorded during COVID times, and a lot of it was done, like, on Zoom, and I guess they had like really bad lighting, or something was sketchy, or the guys didn't want to show their face. Right? They used, like, it looked like an avatar. It looked like it was like a game character.
Yeah, anime cartoon.
Right?
Yeah.
Really interesting. So I thought that was fascinating. But again, that was just my observation about a lot of these dudes that were, like, that one dude, basically, he said he played video games like every night. Every free second he had, he played video games for like 2 years straight.
Do like benders, 3-day benders.
Hard. He'd play like Guitar Hero for like 2 days straight and be like, all right. Like, again, it's that in itself is a virtual reality, right? You get so into it, and it's crude.
Yeah.
Like, again, you know,
Absolutely.
Elon Musk, I saw him in this one talk. He was saying, you know, we started with Pong, right? You know, 2 little squares bouncing,
Yeah.
right? In the documentary, I think it was, right? He starts saying, you know, and then all of a sudden we slowly, and then we got GoldenEye, and then we got, you know, Halo, and then all of a sudden things were. Eventually we could get to the point where there is no discernible, you can't tell the difference between like the video game and reality. Like, that's what I've always said about, like, 2K and Madden and all that stuff. Like,
And
every
that's in,
year
like, a
they're like
20-year
better.
period.
And, like, I remember, around 2015 maybe, I remember walking into my buddy's house and he was playing Madden, and I was like, why is there a football game on right now? It's like Wednesday or whatever, you know.
It's like, dude, I'm playing.
And I was like, right? I was like, holy shit, it just looked that good, right? So, again, you know, and that's just on the TV, and again, it's a game of a game. So you just have to kind of replicate that. But, you know, when will video games become so good? And now we have virtual reality video games, right? With Oculus and all the stuff that Sony's doing, right? Like, it's insanity. But yeah, like, that stuff's starting to really, you know, really pull people away from, like, you know, this reality anyway, right? Like, day-to-day reality. The general consensus reality, let's call it. So one of the interesting theories, actually, Nick Bostrom is one of the guys who actually wrote this big paper. It was titled, Are We Living in a Computer Simulation? And one of his theories is that we are actually, if there is a simulation happening, is that we're actually in an ancestor simulation. So, basically, our ancestors, deep future, like, super advanced humans, are basically creating this simulation to go through history, and it's basically just having us replay history. And if
Interesting take.
That hits different.
right, that we're basically a living history book for people of the future. So right now, someone's looking back and saying, hey, in 2021 on June 10th, like, what was happening?
Yeah.
Right? And, like, maybe we're just here acting it out. Again, like, if anyone's played the game Sims, this is like the whole idea that there's someone outside this universe, not even outside, like, the world potentially, but outside our observable universe, that's, like, kind of pulling the strings, right? Which is super interesting. But anyway, I got Jack helping me out over here. I always forget to turn the laptop on. But this is why we got our boys here. We're helping each other out.
Hands.
So again, that whole ancestor simulation, I think that's fascinating, because, again, you know, why would anyone just put everyone, like, through their paces, right? Maybe, again, it's to say, hey, let's not recreate our past mistakes, because I think that's one of the biggest things that we've had trouble with as a human race is just doing the same thing over and over again. And if we had like instant access to any point, like, you know, we always have talks like this where it's like, I wonder what people were doing like back in the day in our age in the same scenario, you know, 500 years ago, 1,000 years ago, whatever, right? Like what exactly was happening with this ancestor simulation. You could potentially be like, this is exactly what they were doing.
I want to go back to here to see for myself and like experience. That's crazy.
And that's going as far as saying like right now, like this room is the only thing that's being created. It's just being created for this moment to happen.
Whatever our eyes.
As soon as we open the door, like because
loads
the biggest
in.
problem would be processing power, right? If this was computer
How
based,
do you maintain that?
how difficult would it be?
You need a big
And
computer.
that sound of a motorcycle just going past was, they put it in the simulation to make it seem like there's an outside. Right? But it would be really hard, and it's actually in a Rick and Morty episode if anyone watches Rick and Morty.
Of course.
But
June 20th.
yeah, yes,
New season.
dropping new season
Yeah,
finally,
man.
before we all die. Maybe it'll find.
For real.
But basically, it would take a lot of processing power to basically simulate the entire universe. So they only like simulate small portions. I think it's, my whole take on that is like, does that mean right now our 3 simulations somehow are coinciding? And then
right.
they're just like, all right, these guys are in the same room right now. All we have, each one, anyway. This is the rabbit holes you start to get down with all this stuff, folks. We'll try not to get too deep with any of this stuff,
It's
but
just like ones and zeros, just what
Right.
like Alan Watts says, just on and off.
It's where
Well, that's the
simulation
thing.
theory
Right?
meets
It's like
multiverse.
a big game of peekaboo.
well, I'll get to that point. But yeah, basically, like life really comes down to like really simple decisions,
Yeah.
as complicated as we choose to make it.
Right.
If you were to simulate it, it doesn't. It only comes down to like, is he gonna have orange juice or coffee today?
Open door, closed door.
Right? Yeah, it's relatively binary. Anyway, so another thing is that we could be in like an advanced video game again, like that whole idea that basically we just kept playing this video game. We were in virtual reality and been like, I wonder what would happen if we somehow put into the game that you forget that it's virtual reality.
Yeah.
Or the virtual reality is so good that you forget that it is virtual.
Well, that'd be a great
Virtual.
experience.
Virtual.
Yeah.
And that would be
Right.
a part of the game.
Or if you're just so bored, like an advanced being, and you're like, I'm bored. I've experienced everything that's ever
You
happened.
could dream any
I
dream.
wonder what it would be like to experience forgetting all this shit.
2021.
Yeah, Watts has one about
Right?
that. There's
And-
like, if you could dream a dream any night, even in a night of dreaming, you could dream 70 years worth of living.
Mhm.
Eventually, you would get to the point where you just dream randomness, where
Sure.
you forget that you're dreaming, you
Right.
forget that you have any control. You just dream spontaneity.
And I feel like that also in the psychedelic experience, it talks to that too. Like that feeling of like remembering and being like, oh yeah, I remember now, that because we forget that this isn't all that there is. Again, like we said, even science and physics is telling us we're not even seeing a small slice of what reality is on our day to day. And it's like Chrissy D said with the edibles. You take the edibles and you leave the simulation. We're in the simulation now. People think you eat the edibles and you go in the simulation. It could be the other way around. Shout out Chrissy D. We know you're listening.
Shout out, Chrissy. What up, guys?
And you take that, and then you leave the simulation. You get to take a step back and go, wow. And maybe marijuana edibles, anyways, one of the first things, marijuana, weed edibles, and then there's levels to this shit, but you're starting to take a step out of it and understand, and again, take some of those blocks and those dampers off your brain and really experience reality for a bit. And it's tough to deal with for some people, and you can't really do it for a long time. And some people, it's life changing, but that's the whole idea that when you're not changing your reality, you might not really understand it. Again, that's our primitive look at it. That's how our primitive ape brains look at it. We have to kind of smash things and break it into a million pieces to understand it. But that's how psychedelics can work, is as far as kind of giving you that kind of that different viewpoint. Anyway, another idea is basically, again, that whole mad scientist idea, that we are just like a brain, a nervous system in a vat, that, you know, someone, and that's kind of more in the Matrix, how they kind of describe it, is that somehow, you know, we're just electrical impulses are being inputted into our system to just make us think that all this stuff is real. So it's not even, you know, we don't even have a body, we don't even have senses or anything. It's just all, you know. But that's what I was kind of talking about before. Essentially, you know, Plato's allegory of the cave in 3D. That's what the simulation would be, is that we are all unable to see any other perspective, and what is being projected in front of us is what we believe is reality, even though what we're being projected in front of us isn't what reality actually is. And that's Plato's allegory of the cave. If no one's ever heard that, I think I've mentioned it on a podcast before, but the whole idea that essentially there's this cave, and there are people in the cave, and they're chained to a wall where they can't move their head. All they can do is look forward. They can hear each other speak, but all they can see is images on the wall. And these images are being projected with fire. There's a shadow being projected with these images, and there's people holding, you know, objects in front of the fire. Thank you, Jack. To project these shadows that what the people on the wall that are chained see and they believe is reality, and they give these shadows names. And they you know, can identify these shadows, but again, they're just shadows of what the real objects are. And Plato came up with this whole idea, you know, back in his day, in ancient Greece times, and his whole thought was, what if one of those people became unchained and was able to leave the cave and walk out into the sunlight? And they wouldn't be able to see very well because their eyes wouldn't have adjusted to the sunlight. But once they did, they'd see some of these objects that were actually being projected. They'd see them for what they really were. And it would be eye-opening and earth-shattering and such a wild experience. And then imagine trying to come back into the cave and then explain that to the people that are still chained up. And that explains mystical experiences. That explains the psychedelic experience. That explains a lot of learning experiences where it's tough to come back and tell certain people that are so chained and imprisoned in their thought patterns, that, and their reality for that matter, that they can't even necessarily even judge that. So anyway, that's potentially the idea that the simulation is an insane allegory of the cave. Anyway. One of the cool things in the documentary it mentioned was our level of technology dictates our understanding of the nervous system, right? So aqueducts at one time were the height of technology. So basically ancient Rome, everything, aqueducts going for it. So the way the human body was described was using humors, which are like liquids that kind of, depending on how they are in your body, they actually, make change your mood, and like depending on your temperament, it's old timey thoughts. From there, telegraphs became the height of technology, and we started describing the nervous system as nerve impulses on wires. Then computers came out, and we started describing the brain as a big computer. Now virtual reality is out, and we're starting to come up with this simulation theory, right? So it's interesting to look through that lens and say, hey, you know, as our technology grows, and it does open us up more, and we get to look at our universe a little bit closer, you know, how much is it revealing? How much is that real? Or how much is that just basing are we just basing that on our experiences, right? And what we see, you know, on TV and movies and this and that, right? There's Truman Show elements to the simulation theory, right? Where someone is essentially building a set around you and all the people that are in your life are actors, right? And again, some of the stuff, it just has like a lick of like mental health, right? Like just a whiff of it.
Yeah.
And you're kind of like, okay, let's just be open, right? That's all. And again, I mentioned Nick Bostrom before, and you know, he, like, we went through those 5 assumptions. He has 3 propositions, very similar, and basically, if there is an extinction before, if we don't go extinct before the simulation, and if for whatever reason the simulation technology is abandoned, if you can believe those, that we could get past those 2, simulation hypothesis makes most sense, because that we are living in a simulation. Most people are simulated. There's a low chance of being the actual original that we kind of mentioned before. But he's saying that, again, it makes more sense that we're actually living in a simulation, which, heavy duty. Some people believe that because there are many low probability outcomes that happen, it points towards simulation theory. So there's so many things that are happening lately that, like, we've never seen before, you know, that the whole universe is just this novelty machine, and it's always trying to just show us stuff that we've never seen before, and stuff that would have a really low chance of happening. Like, who thought, if you're listening to this if you're going to be listening to this later in the game, but just this weekend, Jake Paul, it was Jake, right?
No,
Logan Paul fought Floyd Mayweather.
Yeah.
Which is, like, number one, wild.
Yeah.
The arguably the best boxer of all time fought like a YouTube guy who was 0-1.
Yeah.
50-0 versus 0-1.
Such a funny stat.
And went 8 rounds with him.
Yeah, it lasted.
And it finished in a draw. So, like, everyone thought he was going to get creamed. So again, you know, not like just a really, really current example that something of really, really low probability happened. Like, the chances of that happen are super low.
Did you hear what Logan said after he won?
No.
In, like, the post
won.
interviews?
What?
Or not, they won.
I know. Well, they said he won, basically.
No,
like,
man,
that's what
he
Jake
didn't
was
win.
saying.
Floyd was taking it easy on him. But anyways.
Yeah.
Yeah, at the end when he won, it's like, this just proves to you guys and to me that this is all just a simulation. I made everything happen. I thought about, like, legit went
No
off.
way.
That was his whole thing at the end, was how this is all fake and how you can make anything happen.
No way.
He was like, tell me how a YouTuber did this. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Legit.
It's for real, though.
Yeah.
And that's the idea. Like, even the idea of, like, The Secret and manifesting all that stuff is, like, potentially hacking the simulation.
I believe in that.
And what we've been kind of getting at in weird roundabout ways is that potentially there are like player characters, like that there are people that can completely choose which way they want to go, just like you're playing in a video game, right? And that all of us are just non-player characters. Like, potentially Elon Musk is actually just coming in and he's just playing around. I'm going to shoot some rockets off. You know, I'm going to do some, like, roller coaster tycoon type stuff. And then I'm going to, like, mess with stocks.
Play with the crypto market. Yeah,
right?
all of it, yeah.
And then I'm going to tell everyone it's a simulation. And then I'm going to dip set.
Yes.
Or whatever he's going to get. You know what I'm saying? So if no one knows that an NPC is non-player character, it's in video games where, you know, if you're playing a video game and you come up to, like, the merchant in the town. And he says, "Hey, you want to do something
Set
for me?
script and all
Would
that.
you like to do?" Yes, you can only say certain
Or they don't
things.
say anything. They just walk by you.
And if you don't understand the concept in your life, just think about walking down the street and you just
How many people you just pass? And
you
they're
just pass
like
by them. They
silhouettes.
say nothing.
Yeah.
Maybe they do say something. It's a cashier. It's always the same response. It's always the same little, "Hey, how you doing? Good, you, peace." You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, super, super interesting. Again, you know, what is it to say that once we get so good with video game technology that it just becomes indiscernible, and we just say, you know what, I'm just playing this game.
Plug me in,
dog. That's
like
all.
that
That's
movie.
all I want.
The movie Gamer with
Yeah.
Gerard Butler.
Yeah, that's a good one,
I
man.
want to watch again now.
Well, it's funny. We're
It's an
gonna get
old
into that because Avatar,
yeah.
as we know, only from the movies and like from Wii and stuff like that, like your avatar on video games. Avatar is also the incarnation of a Hindu deity. In Hinduism, the word avatar means a god that has come down to like our plane, is like walking among us.
Cheers.
Yeah.
World's avatars.
Could be, right? So again, I mentioned Philip K. Dick before. He was one of the early pioneers of simulation. He actually had a vision, like a full on, like spiritual religious experience after dental surgery. Actually, he was full of sodium pentothal, which is like a laughing gas, I guess, or like it's like yeah, more or less. So he wrote 8,000 pages trying to explain his experience
Damn, bro. Crazy.
of essentially seeing a
Broken
horrid
wrist.
slave state, and a horrid slave state of seeing people enslaved and the world like in a bad way. And it was basically recovered memory. He saw it as recovered memory of not like his past, like he doesn't remember like, oh, this is like my old memories. It's of a different present.
That's crazy.
So yeah, so he felt his experiences here in this reality were simultaneously true with that vision that he had, that he felt that it was a moment of clarity where he actually saw through and was like, somehow I'm experiencing both these things simultaneously.
He said that he had it like instantly.
Right.
Like he had all those memories happen
Yes.
in this like one split second.
This whole 8,000 page thing happened in a split second.
Yeah.
When he was like not even like zooming on it, just like at home already coming off the dental gas. And like he called it the exegesis, I think. Yeah. And it was a little bit like I mentioned the Man in the High Castle, that there was what he thought this reality to be, some completely other existence was also there, which is a trip show. Like we've talked about a little bit before, you know, the psychedelic experience and simulation theory, and whether psychedelics potentially remove you from the simulation or they tap you into the simulation is hard to say. Is it changing the simulation? What are you guys saying? Like we could be stepping out of it,
I think we're touching the motherboard
right?
where we can play with the hard drives and
Like we're going into like
cables, plug them in different spots. Boop, boop,
like what's
boop.
that, like observation mode or whatever, like in certain games where you can just like watch.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's called the console. You can go right into the console.
Yeah.
Go right into the core of the game.
But even just like a
Totally.
normal setting in the game, like you don't want to play, you just want to like watch.
Yeah.
And you can just like, and like what they think ghosts could potentially be in the simulation theory are people just in like observer mode or whatever. And they're just like, oh, what's going on here? Trip show.
True.
Gnosis, which is like, you know, we've always see that like domed painting with the sun and the guy like looking through, right?
Yeah.
That's like, you know, that whole idea
Behind the curtain.
right?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Right? Like, what do you think?
I don't know. I lean a lot further towards like the multiverse
Sure.
theory or like concept than I do like a simulation.
Well-
But like I found multiverse through simulation.
Cool.
Where it's like again that idea that like this reality could exist in a multiplicity of ways that are just so concretely similar that you don't realize when you're like jumping,
Sure.
right? But then maybe psychedelics and religious experiences, concerts. I think like take drugs completely out of it. I think concerts, festivals, all those sort of events are where like they're opportunities where if you're in the right mindset, it's like you can take a leap.
Right.
And I use that now as like a little mantra where like when I know I'm like feeling unexplainably good for a reason that I can't find. There's when you do something sick, you're like, cool, I've been productive. Right. It's like out of nowhere. You're just like, okay, whoa. I feel dramatically different. Right. That to me, I just say like, oh, cool, you jumped. Like I've just gone new verse. And again, it's so similar where like going back to that, your question of like, do our three simulations all show up at the same time? It's like I lean more towards the multiverses all exist and you meet here in a moment, but even in that moment, you're all in different parts of it. Right. But again, you exist together across all of them. And that's like, that present.
And we're crossing like a Venn diagram right now.
Basically. Yeah. And that's then how I see it. Yeah, then what psychedelics and shit do? I don't even fucking know. A lot.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah.
In or out, who knows? I think it's closer in.
Well, it's interesting with the multiverse.
So I think our filters, to just keep going on it.
Sorry, I
think in how do you say it? Standard uninfluenced experience of life, which not that there's any trouble with it. Right. It's like you're gonna build filters. Like that's what we do as people.
Totally.
And I think that.
And our senses limit us. Yeah. Like we've mentioned. Yeah.
Oh, for sure. Exactly. Yeah, that's part of that filter. Like part of that filter, right?
Big time.
And I think psychedelics kind of like play with those filters and they can be done against your way or kind of for your way as well. And that's where I think simulation theory is interesting because it depends where you take it. Sure. Like you can do the doom and gloom of it. Like, oh, nothing's real. Or you can be like, oh, okay, well, have that cool idea and then just like kind of use it as a tool.
Right. So understand it and know it's happening.
Yeah.
It's like breathing. When you're not thinking about it, it's happening until I just said that. Now we're thinking about breathing. Right. But it still goes on whether we're thinking about it or not.
Yeah.
Right. It's interesting though. I was about to say about the multiverse theory is like, how we were saying it would be really hard to create a computer that would be able to do like to actually do all the permutations that a human mind goes and replicate consciousness. There is a design even now, if we had the technology, is to actually build a computer around like a sun essentially and using the radiation from a sun which is like so much power that we could actually not only replicate some conscious, we could replicate multiple like universes of consciousness.
Wow.
So if there is a multiverse, that could actually speak to the fact that it's like a multi-simulation and that we can kind of bounce around because it actually all exists in this one system.
Simulation is simulation is simulation.
Well, yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's like there's one original copy and then it's like, all right, let's just make infinite let's make infinite iterations of this and find out what's the best way to do it.
Many drops make the pond.
And you talk about it in Buddhism,
like the best
and you
way to do it. It's almost like a trial and error to see which one's going to have the perfect humanity.
Yeah, and we talk about reincarnation.
By what? And
exactly.
Fuck, who knows?
Chance.
I don't think it would be a human civilization.
No. Or it could be humans that are so advanced.
Intelligence.
Right. Sure.
Yeah. But it's it's
humans
like where
without greed.
What's the form of the form of intelligence I don't get.
Who knows?
I can't.
That's would probably be out of our comprehension.
Sure.
Right?
It is for sure.
Oh, yeah. But yeah, like how many times, like even the fact, like, we were all raised Catholic, Christian, that whole idea that you're going to be judged at the end and someone's going to sit you down and take you through your whole life.
What you do
Why wouldn't that be a debriefing after simulation? You're coming out, you take the helmet off, and they're like, okay, so this was a little bit weird here. Like, why did you take this kid's lunch money in grade 6 or like whatever? You know what I mean?
Yeah, there's a Black Mirror episode that's kind of like that where they go through like his fears or whatever.
Dog. Yeah.
And like it all goes in a second. He goes into the office. And they're like, you sure you want to do it? And he's like, yeah. And then he like spins something, like he does something in the scene, I forget. Goes on, the scene continues, then he gets put into the video game, and then he like goes through all that shit, jumps, boom, he's pulled out of it, and he's like at the original like moment where he like gets to the facility, and he's like, it happened.
It was
what?
like 0.03
yeah.
seconds
Yeah.
into the game.
Yeah.
Where he thought he was
as soon
in,
as you
he
sat
had this
down-
whole like hours and days and
Yeah.
days in the
Yeah.
game, and that's a crazy
It's
episode.
fucked. Yeah, it's
That's
so
a really cool
interesting.
play test. Is called. That's actually has that's Wyatt Russell. That's Kurt Russell's son. Kurt Russell and Goldie Hawn's son.
Interesting.
Good actor. He was in that new Falcon and the Winter Soldier show. He was the U.S. agent.
Ooh.
Classic.
Yes, agent.
Comic book nerd stuff. Anyway, back to that whole gnosis idea of, and that's just knowing. It's kind of biblical. It's a little bit, scripture. We talk like Catholic scripture says, know the truth, and the truth will set you free. That's from John. The kingdom of heaven is within you, right? So again, religion was kind of talking about some of the stuff and the fact that the answers are there. You just have to kind of find them, and they tend to be in plain sight, right? And that was really cool. Being again, like we mentioned, being judged might be a debrief after a simulation. Like I mentioned before, Hindu myths, an avatar is, like we mentioned, our meaning. We golf, we bowling, whatever your little thing is, like on whatever we call it, the avatar. But it's also the incarnation of a Hindu deity, and the incarnation of the deity might be a player coming into our reality just to kind of mess around. Again, your Elon Musk's, potentially some celebrities that they just come out of nowhere, and then all of a sudden they just start doing weird ass shit. You know what I mean? Like celebrities are doing their normal stuff, and all of a sudden they go way off, right? It's like when you're in GTA and you're just like, I'm just going to drive this thing off the bridge
I'm
today.
gonna just get 6 stars.
Yeah.
Sure.
It's like they get bored. Like they have it all, so they're just like, okay, how far can we take this?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? So those people are seeing this reality as a
my
simulation.
Simulation.
Right? Our lives, again, the fact that we think how complex would a computer have to be, how powerful. Again, our lives are seen as complex, but they really come down to very, very simple decisions. If this, then that. If not this, then this. Really.
Boom.
And that's kind of how our whole lives are run. But we see them as so complicated and interconnected, which it is. But that's why we almost see it as a small world, too. We go, oh, look, small world. See this person here. See him like that could be talking the processing, like the processing limit of the simulation can only process so many people. You can only simulate so many people. That board gamer idea where people start going off rails. The Mandela effect. I don't know if anyone's
That
heard.
was nuts. I was actually looking up a bunch of them. And
Right,
I
like the
remember
Berenstain
every single
Bears.
one. Kit
That
Kat,
one's huge.
Berenstain
Kit
Bears.
Kat's a trip.
Yeah. Kit Kat's like with the dash
right.
between the kit and the cat.
Did you see the one about Snow White? Mirror, mirror on the wall, and now it's
Yes.
magic mirror on the wall.
Mirror, mirror.
Mirror, mirror for sure,
Mirror,
right?
mirror
I don't know about Mandela. I'm not really sure. Wasn't really like old enough to know at the time when he was supposed to die, but I remember when he was released. But anyway, a lot of that other stuff is trippy. Again, the Mandela effect, for anyone listening doesn't know it. The whole idea behind the Mandela effect is that there's tons of people that believe that Nelson Mandela died in prison, but there's also tons of evidence that he was also released from prison and died later on. So it's really strange. Again, there's that whole idea about the Large Hadron Collider at CERN in Switzerland, that they ripped space-time by smashing particles together, and we could be in an alternate reality from then, right? Which would have been in 2012. which wasn't that long ago, and 2012 was a trippy time.
Yeah, they said something was gonna happen.
The Aztecs did, right? People have been saying, and like a lot of things, like even like the apocalyptic visions from Catholicism, it's not necessarily the ending of the world in like a big explosion, like the world's gonna go. It's the ending of the world as we know it, right? Right. So like
You know it.
things changed drastically since 2012. There's no doubt. One of the trippy things in that movie was Joshua Cook. We kind of talked about it a little bit. Unfortunately, this is one of the darker sides of this whole simulation theory.
Tread carefully.
Yeah. So if no one knows who Joshua Cook is, unfortunately, he watched The Matrix kind of right when it came out, like a million times. You know, got the soundtrack going, would listen to it day and night, bought a big black trench coat. You know, he was just kind of that kid. You know what I'm saying? He was just kind of that kid.
Yeah.
And he ended up killing his parents because he thought for sure this was the Matrix. This wasn't real. That when he killed anybody and his parents, that he would just prove that they would just, I don't know exactly what he was expecting, just boop, respawn somewhere, or like, you know what I mean?
Spawn in the bedroom or something.
Right? And he like shot his mom and like shot her right in the, this is gory, we don't have to go too crazy, shot her like a couple times, and he was like, that was way more gory. He's like, the Matrix wasn't as gory. And it's like, yeah, man, you can't just shoot people and expect it just to be like a video game or a movie, man, that someone wrote based on a bunch of, like, again, this is the danger zone, right? Where you can buy this stuff so intently that, you know, you take it to the limit. And, you know, I'd be remiss to not mention it's sad, but that's the dark arts. One of the things actually I was thinking about doing some of this research was Reboot. Remember the show Reboot? If anyone's ever seen that, tremendous. Maybe I'm showing my age, but it's a really, really cool. It was like a completely CGI show. One of the first maybe CGI. You remember? He's like, you know, I protect the mainframe.
Yeah.
You know, and
That was a trippy show.
right, and I'm like here, and I don't know. We don't know exactly who inputs the games,
Dot
but I intend to find out. Reboot. Remember that there was like that sweet. It was just badass, and Bob was the guy. Super simple.
That's nostalgic.
And all the
That's
stuff
crazy,
like .com, and like one of the things was like
wanna watch an
Gigabyte,
episode right now.
and like all the things were like Enzo, like
Yeah,
all the things
yeah.
like Hexadecimal was the bad girl. Anyway, like super cool, but in the show, all the characters live inside like a computer, and that big huge purple cube comes down, and if you get caught in the cube, and they say the user inputs games for fun, play that through the mic. What? Here, Jack's got it here. Here, start from the beginning there. So,
I come from the net, through systems, peoples, and cities, to this place, mainframe. My format, Guardian, to mend and defend, to defend my newfound friend.
Yeah.
unreal. Again,
it out.
Reboot,
I
super cool.
skipped that. I already watched that.
Super badass intro. And again, I was thinking about that, the user inputs games for fun or for pleasure, they say, but like that whole, like, the cube comes down, then all of a sudden Bob and the crew are all of a sudden they have to play this game. Like, they have no choice. They're like, it's so cool. Like, some of them, sometimes, like, all of a sudden they're just chilling at the diner or whatever, eating friggin' a hot dog, and then the game comes in and they're all of a sudden in race cars. And they're just like, well, this is what I'm doing now, right? So again, it's interesting where people kind of can go against their reality so much that if it is a simulation and that all that stuff is happening, just go with it. Hey, you're this today. just go with the flow. Maybe tomorrow you might wake up as whatever, right? And the more you fight it, the less pleasure you're gonna get out of it, because if this is all just a simulation, we're supposed to be having fun, then why not go with the flow, right? Which it's an interesting take, because some people can look at it in a dark way and be like, none of this is real, what are we doing? Or, hey, any way you slice it, whether you think we're on this world spinning in outer space, whether you think it's flat, whether you think it's whatever, how is simulation theory any weirder? You know what I mean? Another idea is this GAN's idea, the generative adversarial networks. So essentially there's two AIs that exist somehow in the universe, two AIs competing against each other. One AI is a forger, so it's trying to create pictures of humans that look like humans to fool others. And the other AI is the inspector. And they're constantly just going at each other. And I think that's interesting dualism, because we kind of look at like good and evil. Mm-hmm. And that if there's like this whole idea that there's something, there is dark and light, there is this good and bad, that maybe, and like what else are humans then constantly inspecting something, being like, oh, that's not real. Like, even remember we were just listening to this Joe Rogan like AI replication of him, of a conversation he never had, and immediately we're all like, you can tell that's fake, that doesn't sound exact, but that's how we're built. We are built to like constantly see whether stuff is real or not. Super cool. Again, the Matrix, if you ever see it, it's basically it's close to the experience of it's very close, to the experience of the allegory of the cave. That Neo is experiencing that, coming out of the cave and experiencing that, and his eyes hurt, and Morpheus goes, because you've never used them before. That's that whole idea that now you're experiencing real reality, and it's so heavy duty that you have to kind of get used to it. But then coming back and telling other people is a whole other ball game, right? And again, the strange predictability of fiction, that, whether art imitates life or whether life imitates art with all this stuff. Again, like we said, are we only explaining this because VR is out now and we can now look at our reality as, oh, potentially it's a simulation? And before, maybe we thought, oh, potentially it's our brain is a computer, and this and that and this and that. We will only just keep looking through the lens of our technology, that will continue to keep getting better. And there's that really interesting quote Joe Rogan always says, that we are the sex organs of the machine world, right? That we are actually reproducing the machines and making them better and better, and eventually the machines will take over. Hopefully not everyone. Again, if this is simulation, hopefully that we can manifest some good stuff. And again, little food for thought out there, everybody. Simulation theory, check it out. Hit me up with some questions. Hit me up with some comments if you ever feel like I said anything that you want to clarify or you want to add to the conversation. Again, we want to create this community around the podcast because we love all our listeners, wherever you may be. And again, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, give us a rating, check out the Patreon, patreon.com/thebigmarkpod. We'll check you out later. Take the red pill. Peace.